Hello.
Hello. Did we finish 16?
Yeah, we're starting 17
Okay.
today.
Very good. Okay, I'm all set then.
Today is the 11th, the 5th of the 11th, 24, page 21 to actually we are on page 21. That's the start.
Got it. Yeah.
So now he has 207 electoral votes.
Yeah, she just got California, which is no surprise.
Yeah, she just got California. How many are there in California?
54 or something.
Oh, so she's at 140 or something.
Yeah.
She needs a lot more to get near him. I hope she
Yeah.
does.
The New York Times says he has 89% chance of winning.
Oh, she has?
He has.
Yeah.
89.
Yeah, it's
Ah,
87. It's 87 right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, went back up to 89.
Yeah, we shall see. Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not over.
Not by any chance.
until the lady
Idaho.
sings.
Idaho.
Hayam, you're on the mute.
What?
The poly market has her at 90, has Trump winning at almost 93%.
That's the money people. Yeah.
Yeah, they're over 3.5 billion.
What is
Oh,
the
shocking? Oh, that's the most ridiculous thing of everything. Adam Schiff.
Crazy.
Adam Schiff. How could yeah, that guy's a nut.
Okay, today we start volume 17,
Correct.
page 21. Or did I start already? No,
For 21.
page 21. Okay. Yaakov, I was listening to Professor Shapiro's 18th lecture on Professor Saul Lieberman, and the discussion came up about the saying Hallel in Shul the first night of Pesach, and you made a comment. I don't remember what he quoted you, because it's not a normal Ashkenaz minig. This is something I saw growing up in the Shtiblach would do it, the Hasidic Shtiblach, but like if
Yeah,
young
Halberstam did it, and Isaac.
yeah, but, right, but then young Israel Van Park, Rabbi Krauss people would leave, all the Ashkenazim would leave,
And the guys that used to daven at Halberstam and Isaacson stayed.
and
Like
there would be a
Michael
small
and Sidney,
minion
yeah.
who stayed. And that's the way, and in Yavna we did the same thing. But
Yeah.
he tried to say that the Briskers, L'Shitoso is, there's machlokas between Velvel Brisk and what.
Just FYI, yesterday he finished his 20th lecture and finally finished it on the Musar controversy. Yesterday was number 20. One which I happen to have suggested to him that he do. So
have
if you
to
want to
get-
know all about the Musar controversy, there are 20 lectures by Mark Shapiro on YouTube on it.
But no, I'm doing it. I do it on Spotify.
Right.
But
It'll come.
Okay, he gave a lecture on the Ridvaz, RIDV. I can't find that. If you can help me find where that is. Maybe
Ridvaz? Okay.
It was the Ridvaz. He was an American Rav.
Yeah.
And
Let me write it down.
Well, I'll send him an email because he
Okay.
usually send it to me.
Yeah, he does respond.
Well, I called him about this. I gave him some input about the what I knew about the Hallel thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the previous volume, the first one, Hilchos Shabbos, we discussed a number of subjects related to the commencement of Shabbos, the halachas of Erev Shabbos, lighting candles, Kabbalah Shabbos, Tfilas of Shabbos, and we began discussing Kiddush. And we're going to continue discussing Kiddush. Poskim discussed scenarios of specific individuals reciting Kiddush on behalf of others. For example, may one hear Kiddush in a pronunciation different from that of his own family tradition. For example, an Ashkenazi, right, who's used to hearing Torah Semes, hearing from one reading with the Sephardic pronunciation, Torah Emet. Rav Gedaliah Felder writes that one may fulfill one's obligation for Kiddush in such cases. I mean, is that a Kiddush? I mean, when you walk into shul somewhere and you hear somebody laning the Torah in a Sephardic nusach, would you say that you're not going to be yotzei the listening of Kriyas Torah because of that? I mean, I wouldn't even have thought it's a shaila. But he says in Mareches Beit Knesset, Udvar mevatim v'avarot me'achenu bnei Yisrael ha'ba'im m'medinot shonot. He's talking about different accents, pronunciation of our fellow Jews that come from different places. Kemo mevatei Sfaradim ha'Yudim, ha'poilanim, who say like Ein Kelokeni, Ein Kadoneni, Halitoim, who says Hasomayim Somayim La'aretz, Hanogrim o Ungarim. I'm not sure what they say. Maybe also with the e's, the who, and you say he instead of who. Im Shaliach Tzibur Habami Polania. Va'amivta shelo Polani, motzi hu et Yehudi litoi, o Ungari o lefe. Katav HaGaon HaRishon LeTzion, the Mishpatei Uziel, Rav Ben Zion Uziel, Rav Yaakov Yellen and I saw a picture of the Mishpatei Uziel in Salonika. In the I have it on my phone. Because he was before he became the chief rabbi in Israel, he was the rabbi in Salonika in Greece. It's not a problem of not following your mother's Mesorah. He says it's not an issue. That you can bench and you can daven in any language. That means you can be yotzei Kiddush even in a different language. Or if you hear it in Hebrew and you don't understand it, so why would it be worse if a Sephardi hears an Ashkenazi, they both understand it? That you have Jews who come from different parts of the world that gather in a certain place. Well, they all daven in the same shul. With another Jew whose accent is different. Not a problem to be motzi another Jew. He says, I dealt with this. B'Sefer Edut L'Yisrael. This is by Rav Yosef Eliyahu Henkin, the posek in America before Rav Moshe, who was head of the organization Ezra's Torah. A gabbai like Chaim Eisenberg is very familiar with Ezra's Torah. It's the lifeblood of the Gaboim. Calendars and he and that was his organization. Oh, thank you, Susie. That it's considered part of the general nusach. Kivan sheledidei avarana chonahi. The guy was reading it, for him it's the correct pronunciation. He'll be motzi the other person. You have a little history of Rav Felder. He was a Rav in Toronto for many years. The words Yom Tov Sheni Kilchoso, which is written by Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, discusses whether an Israeli resident may recite Kiddush for a diaspora resident visiting Israel if he's keeping a second day of Yom Tov. Now, the halacha is, in this case, is that the Israeli may not, even if the diaspora resident does not know how to recite Kiddush himself, since the Israeli resident has no obligation of Kiddush at all on this day. The same applies to an Israeli visiting the diaspora for Yom Tov. Thus, he may not recite Kiddush on the second day on behalf of the diaspora residents, since he only keeps one day. Even though most poskim say he cannot do work on the second day of Yom Tov, because if he's in the community, he has to follow that community. Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golios Ayi Kadesh Balayla Obiyom Ben Eretz Yisrael Kedei Lotzi Ben Chutz La'aretz Yidei Chovas Kiddush. So, if a person's visiting Israel and the second day Yom Tov, an Israeli can't make Kiddush for him. Ben Kishem Nitzem B'Eretz Yisrael, Ben Kishem Nitzem B'Chutz La'aretz, whether they're in Israel, whether they're in Chutz La'aretz. It further goes on that b'diavad, the diaspora resident fulfills his obligation if they are in the Golah, and the Israeli makes the kiddush for him, but not if they're in Eretz Yisrael, because there's a dissenting opinion of the Imre Bina, who holds that the diaspora resident would fulfill his obligation if they are in the diaspora, where local residents must keep 2 days of Yom Tov. So even though it's not a full Yom Tov for the Israeli in Chutz La'aretz, so he has to keep no malacha, so therefore it'll work if he makes Kiddush. May one who publicly desecrates Shabbos fulfill the obligation of Kiddush for others. So Rav Ben Sion Abba Shol, in the Orlitz rules in such a case, that others do not fulfill their obligation. Although the person reciting Kiddush is obligated to do so, his actions indicate that the declaration made in Kiddush concerning the significance of Shabbos is meaningless to him. Sheila. Hayim efshar latzeit yedei chovat b'kiddush sheshomem memachal Shabbos. Ein yotzim yedei chova b'kiddush sheshomem memachal Shabbos. U'mi shizdamin l'mokum sheni yochel l'kadish al yayin levado. If he's somewhere where he cannot recite Kiddush on wine, Ikadish B'tzin al Pas. It should be noted that this solution is effective only if one has 2 loaves or chalot in front of him to fulfill the mitzvah of Lechem Mishnah. This is because Lechem Mishnah can only be fulfilled if one eats from those very loaves afterwards, but not if one eats for some other bread. Rav Avishol in a footnote adds that if the person reciting Kiddush would be embarrassed to desecrate Shabbos in the presence of a great individual, such as a prominent rabbinic authority, there is room to be lenient based on a Gemara in Eruvin 69a. So you would be Yotzei his Kiddush. The Pnei Halacha of Eliezer Melamed goes further and writes that nowadays the very act of reciting Kiddush shows that a person has respect for Shabbos, and therefore those who listen will fulfill their obligation. So Shaila was sent, Ani nara bat shleish esrei, I'm a 16-year-old girl. She became about tshuva. V'harai mechadinet drachai. She says her parents respect her. Umiyazim gam makpidim yoter lishmor kashrut. she relates that her parents are keeping a little bit more kosher. Sha'alta hi ha'im lamrot sha'avi mechalal Shabbat, ani yichola latzeit yidei mitzvat ha'kiddush b'kiddush shu oseh. This Baal Tshuva daughter asks whether her mechalal Shabbos father can make kiddush for her. Tshuva. Kevan shavicha mechabedet ha'Shabbat v'rotze lasot kiddush, at yichola latzeit yidei chova b'kiddush shelo. Rav Melamed brings some proofs from earlier halachic authorities, although it's debatable whether all of them would indeed agree with his conclusion. Rav Yaakov Ettlinger. Rav Yaakov Ettlinger was the Aruch Laner, who was in Germany in 1850. I think he's one of the Rebbeim of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. He writes explicitly that one who recites Kiddush on Shabbos is defined as a believing Jew and can fulfill mitzvahs on behalf of others. That's in his Binyan Sian. What about the proper time for Kiddush? We saw in the first year on Kiddush, in the previous volume, that Kiddush must be recited at the beginning of Shabbos. The Torah and the Shulchan Aruch write that for this reason, one should begin the meal as soon as one arrives home on Friday night. You shouldn't delay, you should eat right away. The Tanya, and the Shulchan Aruch says, Rav Yitzchak Yosef adds that one should not delay coming home by talking to others. However, the Achronim write that one who's not hungry need not start eating immediately unless it will cause distress to others, and this the Mishnah Berurah brings us. Despite this ruling of the Shulchan Aruch, there are two practices that usually take place at home before Kiddush is recited. The first is giving a bracha to one's children using the text of the bracha given by Yaakov of Yisimcha Elokim Kefraim V'Chin Hashem. This widespread custom is mentioned in the Sefer HaChaim, written by the brother of the Maharal of Prague, and in the Ma'avarya book, as well as in the Siddur of Yaakov Emden, the Yavitz, and other sources. The second practice is to recite Shalom Aleichem, which was instituted by the students of the Arizal, as well as Eshes Chayil, and some recite other tefillos. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Vim eno ta'av le'achol, if he's not hungry, yachol lamtin milakadesh ad sheyirav, he can wait to make kiddush until he's hungry. Shekvar zachos haShabbos b'tfilos u'beveis hakneses. He already sort of ushered in the Shabbos in his tefillah in shul. The yotzei bazeh mitzvah to say doraisa la Rambam, and he already fulfilled the mitzvah of being Zachar Shabbos according to Rambam. And according to Mogen Avram, which we learned. Mikol Makom, Nire, let's say the wife wants to start eating right away. Or or he has servants that want to go home, or Shar Orchim, other guests, or per person, he shouldn't delay. They are dependent on him. He, for example, wants to delay until he fulfills the mitzvah in its best fashion because he's hungry. But that's not correct to delay them based on that, because they have to follow him. In volume 16, Shir 4, we learned that one may daven Mariv before nightfall on Friday night. Remember, we said you got to wait at least until Plag. Plag HaMincha on, you can accept Shabbos. May one recite Kiddush before nightfall? The Gemara in Brachos addresses this question and concludes that one may indeed recite Kiddush before nightfall. Rav Tzali Shel Shabbos Be'erev Shabbos. This is a famous Gemara that teaches us that Rav davened Ma'ariv for Shabbos even when it was still Friday. And then Omer Kedusha Lakos. Can he also make Kiddush on a cup while it's, early before night? Oeno Omer Kedusha Lakos. Torshma, Adam Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Mitzvah Adam Shel Shabbos Be'erev Shabbos. The Omer Kedusha Lakos, Be'ilchos HaKavos, and halachos like that. Magen Avraham writes that there's also an option to recite Kiddush and eat the meal before nightfall, and later only to daven Mariv after nightfall. Nearly the Imrotz L'Kabel Shabbos B'Vad Yom. You want to accept Shabbos while it's still light. Ula Kadesh, make Kiddush, B'Lechol. Ula Spalal Arbis B'Layla Rishoy. That's a little strange, minig, but L'Chora, the Magen Avraham says it's okay. No, I have power. The Mishnah Berurah rules in accordance with the Magen Avraham, without mentioning a dissenting view. And Rav Elyashiv is known to have supported this. However, the Meiser Rav, which discusses all of various minhagim of the Gra, reports that the Vilna Gaon did not approve of this practice. V'shamati b'shem Gaon HaChosid, the Gaon HaChosid refers to the Vilna Gaon. Sha'omer shezeinu nachon. It's not correct. Miravim b'brachos Rav Tzad Shel Shabbos. Tor Shmuel Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel Mashma Davka K'shmispal Tchila. He wants to learn in the Gemara that it's only when you daven first that Az Yachol HaKadosh Mod Yom. Aval Kisheinu Mispal Ena Yachol HaKadosh. Rav Moshe Feinstein in the Masoros Moshe was also against this minig of making Kiddush and then davening Ma'ariv after. As was Rav Yisrael Belsky. They felt it was odd. We have already seen that Kiddush must be recited immediately before the meal. It follows that when one recites Kiddush before Shabbos has started, the meal will also start before Shabbos. According to those authorities who hold that there's an obligation to add on to Shabbos from Chol, in this event, Kiddush and the meal will take place during the time of Tosefet Shabbos. It would therefore seem that just as the mitzvah of Kiddush can be fulfilled before Shabbos, so too the mitzvah of eating the Friday night meal can be fulfilled before Shabbos. However, in this event, some authorities require a kazayas of bread to be eaten after nightfall. And that was discussed in detail, volume 16, Shir. What is the halacha if for any reason one did not recite Kiddush at night? For example, one was ill with a stomach virus, could not eat or drink anything at night. What should he do about Kiddush? The answer is that he must recite the nighttime Kiddush during the day. Says Masechta Pesachim Kuf Zayin Omen Aleph Amar Rava Hilchasa Tam Mekadosh. Somebody who's going to eat has to make Kiddush first. Or someone who ate food can make Kiddush. To'ah Mavdil. You're not supposed to eat before Kiddush, but if you ate, you still can make Kiddush. Similarly, you're not supposed to eat before Havdalah. But if you did, you can be Mavdil. Mishalo Kiddush Be'erev Shabbos. If you didn't make Kiddush Friday night, Mekadosh V'alach Kol Yom Kulo. You can say the Kiddush the next day. Ad Motzei Shabbos. And the ruling is codified in the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah adds that one recites the entire Friday night Kiddush, but you don't recite the Vaychulu. Imlo Kiddush Balayla Ben B'Shagi Ben B'Mezid Yeshut Tashum Imachar Kol Hayom. Says the Ramah, V'Omer Kol HaKiddush Alayla Mevad Vaychulu. The Aruch HaShulchan clarifies that in this event, there is no need to recite Kiddush twice during the day, as the one Kiddush can cover both obligations. Normally, we do something called Kiddush Rabbah. We make a grand Kiddush, which all it is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Bo Pri HaGofen. The fact that we say Zachar Yom HaShabbos Kadsho or Shamu V'nei Yisrael Shabbos, those are psukim. Technically, you fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddusha D'Rabbah This is machlokas whether it's deraisa or drabonon. Most hold it's drabonon by your meal at lunch. But what the Aruch HaShulchan is going to tell us now is that he didn't make kiddush Friday night. Then the kiddush that you make, the Friday night kiddush that you make by Shabbos lunch will suffice. One kiddush counts for both. According to the Aruch HaShulchan here, such a person need not then recite the paragraphs for the daytime kiddush. The B'tzil HaChochma holds that one should first recite the daytime paragraphs and then the brachos for the nighttime kiddush. Okay, so that's a nice piece. Okay. Kiddush on Shabbos day, which is what we talked about, Kiddush D'Rabbanan. As we learned in the previous volume, Kiddush on Friday night is biblical in origin. In addition to the Friday night Kiddush, Chazal added a rabbinic mitzvah to recite Kiddush on Shabbos day as well. If one did not recite the Friday night Kiddush, the obligation to recite Kiddush on Shabbos day becomes a biblical one, which must be recited with the text of the Friday night Kiddush. Despite its status as a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, the Gemara Masechta Pesachim mentions a biblical source alluding to it. The Gemara also discusses the composition of the daytime Kiddush. Ein li'ala b'layla, b'yom minayin. How do you know you have to make Kiddush in the daytime as well? Talmud Lomer Zachor Yom HaShabbos. And then, what is the Kiddush? B'yom may mavarich. On Rav Yehuda boyer pri hagefen. Rav Ashi yiklu l'mechuza. Rav Ashi visited mechuza. Amrulei, likdish l'nmar Kiddush Rabbah. They asked him, please recite us the great Kiddush, the grand Kiddush. Havulei, and they brought him a cup of wine. Now, Savar, my Neo Kiddush Rav Ashi didn't understand what they meant. What do you mean Kiddush Rabbah? Omar, Michte. Kol habrachos kulam boi pragafen amri bereisha. Anytime we do a mitzvah that requires a cup of wine, either side boi pragafen. Like if you're going to do kiddushin, if you're going to do bris milah, whatever, you make a boi pragafen. So Amar boy priagefen va'agid bey. So he didn't know really what they wanted him to do. So he made the boy priagefen, and then he sort of lingered as if he was going to start to say something else. He was watching his crowd. Are they expecting him to say something else? But there was an elder who started drinking the cup. And he realized that the boy pragefen is all that he has to say. So there's a pasuk in Koheles, a wise man, his eyes are in his head. Meaning, look around what's going on. So he saw that once he made the boy pragefen, they were able to start eating and drinking. He knew that was all you had to do for the Kiddush. The fact that the Gemara said, Zachat Yom HaShabbos, most Rishonim understand this derivation as merely an asmachta, an illusion, and that the daytime Kiddush is rabbinic. Some explain that if it were of biblical origin, Chazal would have instituted an additional bracha to recite. Others suggest that the derivation is not a complete one, since the Torah states, Zachor et Yom HaShabbos, remember the Shabbos day, and not remember it on the Shabbos day. It should be noted, however, that the Maram of Rottenburg writes that the daytime Kiddush is in fact Doraisa. The Magen Avram brings it. And that the Ha'emek She'ela which was the Netziv's Sefer on the Shiltas, one of the first great halachic works, suggests that the Maram based his position on the Mechilta, which presents the daytime Kiddush as the primary focus of the derivation from the Pasuk. Okay. According to the conclusion of the Gemara, although Kiddush on Shabbos day is known as Kiddush Rabbah, the great Kiddush, it need only consist of Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Mecholom, B'Yir Pri HaGefen, the standard brach over wine. And Tosfos Reed explained that the word great it's a euphemism. Ligdish L'Mar Kiddush Rabbah Perush Mishum Dehu Zutter means it's a small Kiddush. They called it on purpose Korele Kiddush Rabbah Kederach Kovel. They didn't want to belittle it, so they expanded it. Like for a blind person, we call them Sagi Nor, somebody who has a lot of light. In a similar vein, they called this, even though it's in relation to the Kiddush of Friday night, which is Doraisa, this is a small Kiddush, it's only Rabbanon, they elevate its name and say it's Kiddush Rabbah. The Rambam writes that the laws of the daytime Kiddush are similar to the laws of Kiddush at night, in that you cannot eat, and the Kiddush has to be right before the meal. This is the Rambam Hilchos Shabbos. Mitzvah levarach al hayayin b'yom haShabbos kodem sheyisod suda shni. You have to make a blessing over wine before you eat your second meal, which is lunch on Shabbos. Zeu anikra kiddush Rabbah. Mavarach pro hagefen bilvad v'shoyse. You just say the brach and you drink. V'achar kach yitol yada. Then you do netilas yadayim v'yisod and have your meal. Asur l'odam sheyitom klum kodem sheyikadesh. You can't eat anything before you make kiddush. Become kiddush zeh lo yeh ela b'makom suda. And the kiddush has to be recited where you are going to eat your meal. The Ravid disagrees with the Rambam, arguing that there is no reason to prohibit eating prior to Kiddush in the daytime. He says, B'chaye roishi, in Misvara Amra, if the Rambam came up with this based on just his own reasoning, then lo savar miyama, svara pchusa mizu. Then he never came up with a reasoning that was worse than this one. Ulafisha karu kedusha rabba yotzalo. The Ravid is saying that the Rambam deduced this concept that you shouldn't eat before Kiddush from the fact that Chazal called it Kiddush Rabbah. They ain't a klum. But this Kiddush is not worth anything. He already made Kiddush at the start of Shabbos, Friday night, before he ate anything. And if he wanted to make Kiddush over bread, Mila Mekadesh, could he not do it? You wouldn't have to say the Boyer Piragafen. The Brach of Amotzi would replace the Boyer Piragafen. He would still be able to eat. So the Ravid wants to say that the Kiddush shouldn't prevent, the Moitzi will be the trigger for your eating. However, the Shulchan Aruch ruled stringently in accordance with the view of the Rambam, and this is the generally accepted halacha, that it's forbidden to eat before Kiddush on Shabbos day. What about Kiddush over challah or drinks other than wine? In the previous shir, Chazal instituted for Kiddush to be recited over wine. The Gemara Masechta Pesachim seems to say that one may also recite Kiddush over bread. Amarav Brun Amarav, Hanoi Tel Yodav Lo Yikadesh. If you made Netilas Yadayim already, you shouldn't make Kiddush. Amarav Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Bar Marta. Akati lo nach nafshe de Rav shchachinu l'shmaitza. Rav has died recently, and we forgot all of his halachas. Zinin sagin avakame kayim nekamei Rav. We were eating in front of Rav. Zinin the chaviv alav rifti was hungry, and makadosh rifti make kiddush over the amotzi. Sometimes he wanted wine. Zinin the chaviv lechamer makadosh chamer. He made kiddush over wine. The explanation follows the commentary of the Rashba. However, Tosfos quotes Rabbeinu Tam, who raises difficulty with this rendering of the Gemara, and he explains it differently. In his opinion, Rav didn't actually recite Kiddush over the bread. He recited Kiddush over wine with the bread in front of him. Rabbeinu Tam then proceeds to explain how you can understand the continuation of the Gemara. Mekadosh Arifta, near Rabbeinu Tam, Dein Mekachim ala pas klal. You don't make Kiddush over the bread. V'acha here, achi perusha. This is how you have to understand. Hanoitel yadov. If you washed your hands already, lo yikadesh. Mishum desfir le'larav yesh kiddush shelo b'makom suda. Rav held that you can recite kiddush not necessarily where the meal is. The chayshinan shema yaflig, and he may go outside v'yelech lechutz, and he'll interrupt between the Netilas Yadayim and eating the bread. Armle Rav Yitzchak, Zim the Chaviv v'lei Rifta. Sometimes Ravashi was hungry, wanted bread. Mekadosh Rifta. Kloimar, having Mekadosh Chamer al das lechol miyad Rifta. No, he meant he was going to make kiddush over wine with the thought that he's going to eat the bread soon. By anotel miyad yadav kodim kiddush. But because he wanted to eat the bread right away, he washed his hands before kiddush. But Zin the Chaviv v'lei Chamra. Sometimes he wanted the wine. He would make kiddush not where the bread was. Ta'ainu suda, where the suda is, like he did it in the living room. The sphere the yesh kiddush shalom b'makom suda. Says Tosas, uman de savar, and kiddush b'makom suda. The ones who hold that you have to make kiddush we're going to eat. Kol shekain, you're not till yadav makadesh. Certainly, you can wash and recite kiddush. The lavi hesek, it's not a hefsek. Uvishami de brachos masham k'mesh Rabbeinu Tam de makachin lapas. That you don't make kiddush over bread. The Rambam accepts the simple reading of the Gemara that it's possible to recite kiddush over bread. He understands that according to the conclusion, one who washes before reciting kiddush must then recite kiddush over bread. Hayim etav lapas yoyser min hayayin. A person would rather eat bread than drink wine. Doesn't have wine. Wash his hands. He makes hamotzi umakadesh, and then makes kiddush. Then he eats. Somebody who forgot to make kiddush Friday night, and then washed his hands before reciting kiddush. He can make kiddush on the bread. The majority of Rishonim agree that it's acceptable to recite kiddush over bread. The Rosh writes that it was the accepted practice. Since according to Rabbeinu Tam, one may not recite kiddush over bread. The Ramah writes that one should only do so if wine is not available. Says the Ramah, if there's wine available, you should make kiddush over wine. The Bir Halacha, the Mishnah Berurah quotes a dispute whether this chumrah applies even when one prefers bread. He concludes that if one does not like wine at all, you can be lenient to recite kiddush over bread. Hainu, you still should use wine if you generally prefer bread over wine. The Darkei Moshe was the sefer that the Ramah wrote, Ayin Sham. That if a person likes bread more than wine, he can make kiddush on bread. B'nei Rambam Mashma the Mefarish the Rivta Chavivale, Hainu Yosem Yain. When the Rambam talked about preferring bread, he meant over wine. The tour, Shem Rav Hai Gon Mashma the Rivta Chavivale, Hainu Shayain and Makubal. The Rav Hai Gon learned that doesn't mean he likes bread more. It just meant that wine wasn't available, or he didn't like it. The near the boyfriend said, based on this Rav Hai Gon, you can rely on the Beis Yosef to make Kiddush on bread. Regarding the case of the Gemara where a person washed before Kiddush, the Shulchan Aruch follows the Rambam and writes that he should recite Kiddush over the bread. The Ramah writes that the common practice in Israel was always to wash before Kiddush, even when you recited Kiddush over wine, except for the Seder night. So the Shulchan Aruch says, first make Kiddush on the kos, then and drink the wine. Then noitel yodav uvarch alatis yadayim. Then go wash your hands. V'notel yodav kodim Kiddush. If you wash his hands before Kiddush, Gali died to the rifta chavivale. He's showing his mind that he prefers bread. And then lo yikarish lo yayin elapas. You should go just make the Kiddush over the bread. The Ramah says yesh oimin lechatchila yesh lito yodav kodim HaKiddush. That lechatchila you should wash before Kiddush. Lekarish lo yayin. V'chen haminig parsha b'medina seilu. And this is the minig in Poland and in Germany. The Beis Yosef explains that this approach is based upon the Rosh Rabbeinu Tam. Thus, as explained earlier within Tosfos, since the halacha follows Shmuel that Kiddush b'Makom Suda is required, the Kiddush recited between the Netilas Yadayim, the Amotzi, is not a hefsek, and no concern exists that one will be interrupted by leaving or changing location. The Mishnah Berurah cites those who disagree with the Ramah and notes that many do indeed wash after Kiddush. However, he concludes that if one did wash before Kiddush, he should follow the Ramah rather than reciting Kiddush over the bread. Means recite the Kiddush with the Yayin and then make your Amotzi. He says some Achronim say that it's preferable to first make Kiddush on wine before you wash your hands. Kedasa Mechaber. That's how most of us, I think, have the minig. But if whatever reason he washed his hands, kodim Kiddush, he should act like the Ramah who said, still make the Kiddush over wine. The commonly accepted practice today, in accordance with the Berurah, that one recites Kiddush first, then performs the Netilas Yadayim. Many Jews of German descent follow the Ramah. See Rav Yaakov Hoffman, washing before Kiddush just for Yekes. There's a historical development. Only German Jews conduct themselves in this manner.
Also, in many summer camps, in order not to have the whole camp have to go out again, first play Kiddush and then go back outside the dining room, especially if the washing facilities are outside, the whole camp first washes and then they make Kiddush. That's the way it was proposing him.
So Kiddush over Yayin like the Ramah, and then Amotzi.
But they wash first.
Yes.
And they make Kiddush and then so they don't have to all go out again and wash, which is a big tircha.
We in Camp Moshava did the tircha. We went in, somebody made Kiddush over wine, we had a piece of cake or whatever. Actually, the Kiddush was made, we had a Kiddush before laning. Or, you know what I'm saying? And then we finished Musaf, and then there was a shear, then we went in for lunch. So we avoided the whole issue. Because Kiddush was made as part of the davening. Do you remember that, Susie?
That's where all the Kiddush clubs came from, Bnei Kiva.
The Kollel does that. They make Kiddush and they learn, right?
Because they learn. That's different.
Learning doesn't qualify as a Kiddush.
If the Kiddush club left the shul to go out and have a learning of a block Gemara, that of course would be fine.
Chaim, cut it out. Don't blame Bnei Akiva for everything.
Walter, you forget that I was very involved in Akiva.
Yeah, but Bnei Akiva all over done it, you know.
Walter, did you guys make Kiddush like we did before Musa? Like, you had a Kiddush and then you finished the davening and then, or you did it?
They started Kiddush before Shachris.
By the way, when I was in Bnei Akiva, we did not make Kiddush during Tefillah. We waited till after davening.
No, it was always after davening. Bnei Akiva camp, you waited till after davening. In Bnei Akiva shul, you waited till after davening. This Kiddush is a Hasidic minhag over here that came from Los Angeles.
I'm not sure. Yeah, there's no question we had that minhag. We went to the Chadar, we had Kiddush, and we went back and finished. I think we made Kiddush before laning.
No, in South Africa, you waited on Shabbos. You waited until you finished, and then you made Kiddush. No such thing.
Okay. Using other drinks for Kiddush. In addition to the option of reciting Kiddush or Challah, the Gemara Masechet Pachim discusses the possibility of reciting Kiddush and Havdalah over beer. Regarding Havdalah, the view of the Amoira Meimar is that beer may only be used in a place where it is considered Chamar Medina, the wine of the province. We learned, we're going to learn I think we're going to learn Havdalah later on. Yes. It's going to be later on in this volume. Amar Lemar Yenuko Mar Chashisha ben Rav Chizda Rav Ashi. Zim Lechadi Ikla Meimer Lasrin. Our Meimer visited our community. Lahavalon Chamra. We had no wine for Havdalah. Aisinale Shichra. We brought him beer, Velo Avdil. He didn't want to make Havdalah. Ubas Tavas. And he fasted because you can't eat until you make Havdalah. L'mocher Trachna Vaisinale Chamra. We extended ourselves. We found him some wine, Va'avdil, the toy meeting. He ate something. Lashana, I guess Rav Ashi was coming on his yearly fundraising trip as the Rosh, or maybe giving a scholar in residence. So the next year, Suik Lalasri came back, Lavalan Chamra, and we didn't have wine again. I seen a Shichra. We brought him beer. Omar, Iyachi Chamar Medinu. I see that it's hard for you guys to get wine. Chamar Medina means this is the wine of this country because they don't have wine. So what do you guys drink? Beer. So therefore, it's like the chamar, chamra. Chamra is the Aramaic word for wine. So Chamar Medina refers to, it's the wine of the province. The Gemara one quoted other Amiroim who maintain that one may not recite either Kiddush or Havdalah over beer. This is again in Psachim, Luv Zayin Omer Al. Boy me Ravunim Rav Chizda. Ma'ala Kiddushi HaShichra. Can you make Kiddush on beer? Omer Hashta Uma Prizuma Ute'eni. So, beer made out of barley or figs or va'asni or berries. The boy me name Rav, where we asked Rav, and this, whether we could use those things. And Rav asked Rav Chia, and Rav Chia asked Rebbe, V'lo poshet lei, and they never got an answer on those. Shichra Maboy? Well, because regular Shichra was date beer. Now, date beer is inferior to barley beer and fig beer and berry beer and all that. So if they didn't have an answer on those inferior beers, on those beers, certainly on regular beer, they wouldn't have an answer. So Svormine, so he understood from this, that Kiddush you don't make, but Havdalah you can. Rav Chizda, no, Just like you can't make Kiddush on beer, you can't make Havdalah. Itmar Nami Amarav Tachlifu Baravim or Shmuel. Kashem Shem Mekach Nalav Kachim Avdin Alav. So from the Gemara, it seems that we don't make Havdalah on beer either. It's not explicit in the Gemara whether the Aboiramu forbid reciting Kiddush Havdalah over beer, forbid this even in a place where beer is the wine of the province, Chamar Medina, or whether in this instance they would agree with the Maimer that Havdalah may be recited over beer. As we will see in Shir 5, Poskim agree that Havdalah may be recited over Chamar Medina, presumably based upon understanding that these Omaram do not disagree with the Maimer in this regard. Concerning Kiddush, Tanoim also dispute as to whether beer may be used. Ton Rabbanon, Ein Mekachin ala Sheikh. You can't make Kiddush on beer. Mishum Abelazar Rab Shimon Amar Mekachin. But there is a Tana that said you could. Here too, it's not explicit whether Tana Kama who forbids reciting Kiddush over beer forbids this even in a place where beer qualifies as Chamar Medina. But unlike with Havdalah, many Rishonim rule that only wine or bread may be used for Kiddush. The logic for this distinction is explained by the Ritz Gaius. The Ritz Gaius is an Achron, also in the 19th century. Is M'Rabanan de Sovar, the Ein Mekachin al Shecher Klal. There are those of the Chachamim who hold that you don't make Kiddush on beer at all. Avagav to Chamar Medina, even though it's considered the wine of the province. The Kivin the Mekachin al Pas, who Pas Mitsuya, he called it Chamar Medina. Since you are allowed to make Kiddush on bread, and bread is something that's always around, it's preferable to doing that on Chamar Medina. Avaliin Havdalah, Holveim Avdil La Pas, you don't make Havdalah on bread, Mavdil ala Shechar, Chamar Medina umistavra kavase. In other words, according to this view, for Kiddush, it's not permitted to replace wine with other drinks, as the correct replacement for wine is bread. And that's how the Rambam paskins. Medina Sharov Yena Shechar, in a community where most of the, I guess, what is used is wine, the alcoholic beverage is beer rather than wine. Avapishu Posel Kiddush, even though he says you can't use it for Kiddush, Mutter Lavdi Alav, Hoyel Chamar Medina. It's considered Chamar Medina. Okay, I'm going to stop after this Rambam because the Rosh will be more the halacha, and then we'll learn the halacha, Shulchan Aruch, and the Mishnah Berurah and the Abiyah Omer next week. And we have other things, white wine, diluted wine. We will continue in Kiddush as we continue to learn this. Have a good, buddy.